Is this the pipe your contractor's burying? Look at that. Junk. Now that's not entirely true. Right here, this is standard sewer pipe, drain pipe. Can be used as both. Just 4-inch. It's just a joke. Problem is if you're using it as you're supposed to, it's fine. But right, that's how strong it is. It's just an old piece I had around. Look how thick it is. Listen, even to the sound of it. Right? Super thin. This is Schedule 40. This piece has been riding around in my truck even for a couple years. Hear it? Point is, Schedule 40 versus drain pipe. Now, the question you need to ask your contractor is, what's right for the job? Okay? That sewer pipe, that drain pipe, it absolutely has its place where it's fine, and you don't need to buy that Schedule 40 that's super heavy and super expensive. Foundation drains is a perfect example. I've got some, but it's a big coil and I don't want to get it out. So let's start there. Foundation drains. You know, you've all seen it, the black corrugated pipe. It's about 4-inch, buy it at Home Depot. It's like a limp noodle. Well, that's what this connector goes to. You see how thin that is. I mean, that's 2 fingers, right? Like bend it up. The problem with this stuff is it's pretty much useless everywhere. It has its specific tasks that it's good for, but a drain needs to have slope. Even when you're using the perforated pipe like this, right? If the whole thing sits around your foundation dead level, you're not going to get any fall, right? So yeah, the water can get in there, but it has to fill up high enough that it gets to the exit point. As to where, when they have slope on them, as the water table, it fills up in there and it can escape and run and drain out. So a properly functioned drain, most of the time when there's actually water draining, you're just going to see a trickle, just kind of constant run out. Around your foundation is fine, because around your foundation, you're not driving on it, you know, bearing down. Pretty much once you're backfilled, you're done. You got to be a little careful in your first foot of fill, because you can collapse that drain pipe with the compactor. But once you're past that, you're okay. This stuff here is so, it's not that it wouldn't hold up down there, it's that it's so flexible. It's damn near impossible to lay it at a nice constant slope and elevation for good drainage. So then you get water pockets in there and silt pockets, and it's not nearly as effective. You're far better off with the solid drain pipe. Same thing in a leach field for an on-site wastewater treatment system. We use the Schedule 40. Best practice, not required, best practice, required some places by code, is you reuse the Schedule 40 out of the house into the tank, because those tanks are big and they're heavy, and even if they're plastic, once you fill them up with water, they're heavy. Even though you compact and stuff, we have a lot of clay here. It's a good place to break a pipe. This standardized sewer pipe, even the non-perforated, is this size. It's just so thin, it breaks so easy. It'll break so easy. And so best practice is Schedule 40 till you get down to your field. And then once you're down at your field, you're not ever supposed to drive on a leach field anyways. So being that you're not supposed to drive on it anyways, it's supposed to stay loose and airy. So it should never get compacted. It should never get driven on and continue to get that hard pack over time. And that's why this is absolutely the best choice for in your field. because it's much cheaper. And once you install it, the fittings are much cheaper too, because they're equally as thin. But once you install it, it should be fine. That being said though, into that leach field, sewer cleanouts, whatever, most guys just use some of the pipe they have. You have observation ports here in Colorado at the end of each run of your infiltrators or at the corners of your beds. Well, they'll use this same drain pipe, and then they'll just throw the same cap on it, and that's your observation port. They just put it on there loosely because you don't want stuff getting in there, and so that you can get it off. Well, the problem is these are stupid thin. They sun rot. They literally fall apart. I've literally seen them fall apart on the pipe because they're cheap and they're thin, and that's just not really what they're made for. Secondly, these get broke above ground all the time. They get sun bleached and stuff after a few years. Hell, you bump them wrong with a lawnmower, you'll break them. The deer can break them. As to where the Schedule 40, once again, quite a bit more expensive. But do you really want dirt and crap getting in your observation ports and your cleanouts? Do you want to have to, nobody, even us contractors, don't like digging up septics and sewer lines to septics, because guess what? Those pipes are full of sewage and, well, ew. Anyways, much more solid. Doesn't degrade in the sun nearly the same. I mean, yeah, if you hit it with a big machine, it's still going to shatter after years of being in the sun, but look at the cap for it, right? I can literally fit the cap for that drain pipe loosely inside the cap of the Schedule 40. That's how much thinner it is, okay? I mean, we're talking massively thinner. Okay, much heavier duty. I'm not a plastics expert, but I mean, I would even venture to say that there's something different about the composition, because this stuff just does sun so much better. But then even on the cap side, like I said, quality of materials matters. Instead of that cap, which even not glue, even just setting it on, they end up drove down and they're like weld themselves over time and you can't get them off. They make threaded caps, right? And these are what I use on the cleanouts and the observation ports, because it's way more professional looking, and two, it's a much better access point. Even using these versus caps, if people want, because they don't want these pipes sticking up. A lot of people like these actually sticking up because it tells them exactly where their field is all the time. But we can cut it off down low down here, put this cap on, and then put like an irrigation valve box in one of the plastic boxes with the lid you pop up, so that it's not poking up and out. My point is that this is a quality of materials thing. There's absolutely a place and a time for the drain pipe that makes sense and let's use the more cost affordable option, even though it's not the heaviest thing out there on the market, because there's no need for the heaviest thing on the market. That would be overkill. It'd be like making your concrete patio 2 foot thick when all you're going to do is have a picnic table on it instead of just making it 4 or 5 inches thick, right? It's just not needed. So, but you got to be careful. I've run into contractors over the years. They're like, "Oh, I use Schedule 40 for everything because nothing but the best." Okay, great. Like that's nice, but why? Like it's kind of a waste of money. But I also dig up countless repairs where people have used that drain pipe for everything. That sewer pipe, that 4-inch thin walled. They did a 100-foot run through rocky material. As you can tell in the background, we're in rocky terrain here, right? And even though they bedded it, those rocks migrate in the freeze thaw and end up pushing on pipes and stuff. And I can't tell you how many of those stupid thin wall 4-inch pipes I've dug up. Even in your, like, okay, we got to keep this cheap though, Jared. Even in your cheapest situation, if you're crossing a roadway, running along a roadway, anything that's going to get driven over and get that kind of continuous packing going, or it's not going to be very deep, you want the heavy pipe, because literally that continued driving over it it continues to pack. You can literally grab a piece of this that pipe will slowly over time collapse. Because unlike a water line or something that's full of water all the time, that kind of help protects it from that collapse so much, that's full all the time with pressure, realistically, when you open up a sewer pipe, there's only about that much of it that shows signs of use, right? Like everything just flows down it because you've got it set at an eighth or a quarter inch per foot, or an eighth to a quarter inch of fall per foot. And that's so it keeps everything running. Well, in actuality, as that water runs down this smooth wall pipe, it only uses a small section of the bottom. The reason for bigger is, I think, has to do with clogs and stuff. You know, be able to get bigger things down when they go down. Anyways, that's that on sewer and drain pipe, okay? So make your contractor spell out what materials he's using. You know, your foundation drain. A lot of times the engineer, the architect, whoever will call out what they want in there. There are some other options. There's some stuff that's not quite as rigid as that. Like you gotta be a little careful setting it because it can swag, but it's actually triple wall and is stronger than that. About the same price as that, but not nearly as expensive as the Schedule 40. I love that stuff for foundation drains. I don't know where all you can get it. I actually get it at, I actually get that stuff from Home Depot. It's my favorite for foundation drains, for the perforated. But make them, you know, tell you what they're putting in the ground, right? Don't just assume that, oh, well, he's a good contractor, he's going to do it right. Ask, you know, when you get 4 bids and you got one clear down here at 10,000, you got one as high as 20,000, start asking the questions about materials. My guess would be is your guy down here at 10,000 is running the cheapest of the cheap of the cheap of everything he can cheap. Bare minimums everywhere, maybe even not that. Your guy at the very top probably absolutely has quality materials, but what you have to sort out is now who has quality of work, who has, you know, what materials are they using? It could be the difference in just vendors, right? Like I have a sales tax license. I have wholesale agreements with a handful of vendors so that I can resell their products so that I get a better price on their stuff so that when I turn around and use it on projects and sell it to a customer, I'm actually selling it for what they could go buy it at the store themselves, or sometimes even less. You know, if my contractor discounts, you know, 15-20%, a lot of times I split that with the customer, so they're actually getting a better price by buying the materials from me, letting me buy the materials, than if they went down and bought them themselves. So yeah, dig into what they're installing. I don't care if we're talking about construction or your landscaper or an electrician or a plumber. Quality matters. Just because your plumber, your electrician, whatever, it's getting inspected and they can say, yep, it passes to code. Generally with plumbing and electrical, to code is absolutely good enough, but you know, code is also still sometimes just a bare minimum. There's stuff out here in this rocky terrain that'll pass for code that's really not best practice still. Anyways, moving on. So the next part of this I'm going to talk about is water lines. So this is PureCore. A lot of people call it blue poly. Comes in all different sizes. 1/2 inch up to 2 inch are the most common. I actually looked one time because I get preferred pricing with Home Depot because I buy enough there. But I looked one time, I can't actually get this there. They just don't really sell it. They do all PEX-A, which a lot of people will tell you PEX-A and PureCore is the same thing. It's not. It looks very similar. They're all CTS, which is copper tube size, which means outside diameter of a 3/4 inch piece of PureCore and a 3/4 inch piece of poly and a 3/4 inch piece of PEX-A is all the same. which means the same fittings, compression fittings and stuff will work on all of them. One of the plumbers I work with a lot, he says PEX-A is stronger underground because he says he can stretch it with one of his tools that does stretch fittings. I understand what he's saying, that because he can stretch it, it, you know, is harder to break. I've actually never seen any of this broken, and I have dug up some stuff that was downright kinked because of very poor install. But I've never actually seen this break. I've always seen leaks at fittings. I've seen it like literally kinked in half because somebody did something really stupid. But I've even seen it stretched some. I've never actually seen a straight out break in PureCore though. They claim you can bury it in straight boulders, that I could dig a trench and use that boulder pile back there to backfill it and it would be fine. I can believe that. I've literally dropped in rocky terrain digging, and I had the water line laid out there. Accidentally had a big boulder slip out of the bucket or something and hit this, roll across it while it was laying on the hard ground, and didn't hurt it in the slightest. Anyways, so fittings. I got two here. There's lots of different brands, styles, kinds. First of all, I want to talk about SharkBites. I absolutely love SharkBites when I'm plumbing in my house. I don't put these outside. I don't put these underground. I don't really use these professionally. I use them for doing indoor plumbing. They're the coolest thing ever, and I friggin' love them. Because, right, they're so simple, Jared. You just stick it together and push. This is actually 1 inch to 3/4, so that wouldn't fit there. But yeah, you just push it together and bam, sealed, done, connected, whatever. Awesome. Well, I didn't actually realize for a long while, because it's not like it clearly states it on the tag or something. But if you actually read the instructions on these things, I think I read about it on their website, they're not supposed to be buried outside. And if they are, they sell this special tape that is stupid expensive, completely defeats the purpose of using a SharkBite. And you have to wrap everything up, and the idea is you're trying to get it air and water tight. Because the outside of this connection, as flawless as this thing is, the outside is not designed to be exposed to moisture and all that. So and the acidity and alkalinity of the soils and stuff will actually destroy this. So they tell you got to wrap it up like airtight. Well, let me tell you, if you've ever wrapped up a T connection down in the dirt with silicone tape, it's a pain and it doesn't work very well. So SharkBites, toss them, not what you want for your outside work. And if you see your contractor installing them and they're not taping them up really good with that clear special tape that made by SharkBite, say, hold on a minute, Poncho. So next, all right, we've been talking about expensive materials, cheap materials, what's best for the project, right? I stay in good contact with my pipe suppliers. They turned me onto these years ago. It amazes me how many contractors still use all brass, because they're like, oh, nothing but brass. Brass is the best, and brass is unbeatable. Yeah, go buy a brass fitting in 2 inch, just a coupler for PureCore. Oh, costs more than the pipe. And I mean the pipe for the whole run. I mean, I can go buy a roll of this stuff for like $1 a foot or something. And the fittings to connect it on both ends will cost more than the 300-foot roll of pipe did. It's ridiculous. Yeah, the brass one's incredibly expensive, and they're also incredibly sensitive. If you've ever worked with that stuff, they've got a rubber gasket in them, and you slide over, and there's springs on that, and everything's got to just stay really clean, and everything's got to be really just perfect here, and drilled edges off, and everything's just got to be in tip-top shape on them. And then threading them on, it's a fine thread, and everything's brass, so if you accidentally get a thread wrong, you basically just ruin the fitting and just ate a very expensive fitting, and now you got to go get another one. My pipe supplier turned me onto these years ago. I started using them with just when I was doing 2 inch. Freaking love these. They're still a compression fitting. Brass requires a stiffener in here. Think about when you're doing like swamp cooler line, you know, you get that little metal stiffener that goes inside and then the ring on the outside. It's kind of the same idea. It's more sophisticated with brass, with water lines, but it's the same concept. It's compression fitting, and you gotta have that stiffener inside for it to work. This is still a compression fitting. It's plastic. It's got these little plastic jaws in there that you would never think would work. And then there's literally just a rubber O-ring behind that. All right, that's simple. And this isn't actually going to fit tight on here because this is 3/4 and this is actually a 1-inch fitting. It's just what I had around. Anyways, it's literally simple. Bam, it goes on. Look how coarse the threading is. You thread it down. I can literally grab it with 2 pairs of channel locks. It's easy to grip. It's got these big ears that really are tough. 2 pairs of channel locks or a couple pipe wrenches. All I got to do is run it down to the hilt. I don't have to wrench on it. I don't have to, you know, and it's not that hard to get it down to the hilt, really. You know, on brass fittings, a lot of times you're really wrenching at the end and you're like, oh God, is this going to break? Like, wrench it down. I've never had one leak, knock on wood. I use them in 2-inch. I mean, I think in 2-inch, I'm talking about like a $20 fitting versus a $50 to $75 fitting in brass. For just a compression fitting to connect 2 pipes together. Yeah, they're friggin' amazing. They're way cheaper. They work good. They make them in end caps. They make them for all kinds of things. The one place that I personally recommend brass, I'm not an expert, I'm not a plumber, I'm just a dirt guy that doesn't like to have to go dig up his own work to fix stuff for free because I screwed up. And so you kind of learn what to use and what not to use. When I've got to go from compression to threaded to connect to something else, or I've got to connect to a different pipe style, whatever, a lot of times where there's that threaded connection, I will go brass there. I'm still a little bit of a believer with the old school guys that, you know, metal's better than plastic. And I don't like the idea of a little 3/4 threaded nipple out here threading in. It just seems like a good break point. I trust the brass more. So I use those. That's where I still use brass. Curb stops, things like that. That's your water shutoff valve. Man, they're really expensive, but brass is still the way to go for those. I definitely, you know, feel free to comment if somebody knows about something better. I'm always interested in new technology. Something I don't have that I keep swearing I'm going to buy, and every time I start doing a bunch of water line or stuff and I'm going to buy one, the next year water line seems to be a slow point. But they also make fusers. So you might see guys have these connections. Literally, it melts the pipe together to make the connection, and you'll end up with this little mushroomed out end. You would never believe to look at one of those fused fittings that it's when they fuse pipe together and you see this like mushroomed out melded thing that's not going to leak and that it's solid, but it is. It's pretty amazing. I've used them before, but just never got around to buying one. Had enough work to justify it. Anyways, quality of materials matter. Just don't let your contractor talk you into cheap materials to save a buck. It is always cheaper to pay more once than to pay to do it twice cheap. You know, you think about your cheap bids, right? Oh, we got to get a new sewer line put in out to the street or a new water line put in out to the street. And you get a $10,000 bid and a $17,000 bid. Well, that's a big difference, right? I mean, that's like 70% more. But the $17,000 bid, if they're using good materials and you got a quality contractor, probably last you the rest of your life, at least 20, 30 years, right? $10,000 bid, if you have to redo it in 10 years, have you saved anything? We all know in 10 years, stuff's going to be way more expensive. So that $10,000 bid is probably now a $17,000 bid anyways. But when you have to redo it in 10 years, even if you can get another $10,000 contractor to do it cheap, what have you gained? Cost you $20,000 to get 20 years. You could have paid $17,000 to get 20, 30 years and been done one time. It is almost always definitely cheaper to pay to have it done right the first time than to have to pay to do it twice. This is Jared, Grizzly Grading and Excavation. This has been a Grizzly Truth. Have a good day. And I guess I better add, at the end of the day, the dirt doesn't lie.